When it comes to underrated artists in the emo rap space, there's one man that everyone seems to overlook time and time again, and that artist is known as Drippin' So Pretty. Someone who, just like many of his contemporaries, found himself in the clutches of addiction from a young age, watching his career grow and grow while his mental and physical health deteriorated, getting so bad to the point that he almost didn't recognize himself. Yet, unlike the usual suspects, he's never been one to glorify drug addiction and instead shows people the dark sides of it. What can truly happen when that rockstar lifestyle stops being fun and you find yourself surrounded by nothing but the destruction that you've created within your own life. And with ODs going up year by year, and with the glorification of drugs being more prevalent now than it ever was, considering most of these kids have never been outside of their backyard and now they think that drugs are cool things to do. And because of that, I feel like the story of Drip is very important to cover now, so let's do just that when we look into the story of Drippin' So Pretty. Davis Wilson was born June 3rd, 1994 in Southern California in a small coastal town known as Acontis. I'm sorry guys, I really can't pronounce these American names, but that's what it is. It's in San Diego. It's a city right off the coast, and there's a lot of beaches around where people like to surf and hang out, and I also heard that it has a pretty high Hispanic population, and because of that, a lot of people online thought that Drip was actually Hispanic himself, but it turns out that his dad is full white and his mom is half Japanese, which he only revealed in 2020 when he went on the Masked Gorilla podcast. But for now, we gotta talk about his childhood and what he did. Like I mentioned previously, a lot of people like to surf within his city, so he was also pretty into it. He also liked skateboarding because they're not too far off from each other, and he also listened to a lot of music, watching music videos on MTV, and even played drums. This shows that he was a pretty intelligent kid even early on, even if the only reason that he started playing drums was basically by coincidence and wanting to avoid PE class, so he would join band, and then one of his friends happened to give him a drum kit, and he just picked it up and started playing. Anything to avoid running that mile, I guess. During his time hanging out around skate parks, he would start to get introduced to the drug culture as well as more hip-hop music. He always liked hip-hop and black metal, Queen, a whole bunch of different types of music at home, but once he started going to the skate parks, this is where he started to hear people like Wiz Khalifa, Chief Keef, and all the people that he would start to look up to. There's so many to list, I probably couldn't even say them all because he had a lot of musical influences. Although it is important to note that Gucci Mane is on that list, so that's another person influenced by Gucci Mane. Like I said, I feel like he's the most influential rapper to ever live at this point. It seems like everybody looks up to him. But it's the first part of my statement that actually affected Drip's life quite a bit, because that drug culture would introduce him to weed, smoking it a little bit in middle school, and then once he got to high school, he would start to step it up, doing ecstasy almost every weekend. And the thing about ecstasy is the more and more you do it, the less effective it gets, because the first time that you use it, you have all this serotonin that's built up in your brain and it all releases at once, but then after a while it seems like you get less and less. And I'm only saying that for educational purposes. Do not come to these videos to find out how you should do drugs. I only said that because he would eventually go to Xanax, and the reason for that is probably because Xanax is something that you could do almost every single day, where ecstasy eventually gets less and less powerful the more you do it. He began doing them almost every day, and because of that he would have to steal money just to get his fix, because of course he's like 14 years old, he doesn't have a job, he has no way to get money, and of course when you're doing benzos it doesn't take too much to get into opioids as well, so he started smoking those almost every weekend as well. And at the time, Xanax and Oxycontin were seen as cool drugs to do, but one thing that was never cool is when he started doing heroin. Yeah, that's right. At the age of 14, he started smoking heroin, and eventually he started shooting it as well. He was hanging out with some older friends, and he started doing this almost every day. It was fun for the first little bit, until he woke up one night in a cold sweat with his feet kicking, realizing that he was going through his first ever withdrawal symptoms. This turned his drug use from just a fun thing he would do to pass the time to something that he had to do just to feel normal. Because the thing about heroin is once you stop taking it, you start to get sick, so you have to keep taking it just to not get sick, and it doesn't even get you high anymore. It becomes an absolute need, and it's very hard to get off of. He would hide this addiction from his mother for quite a while, but eventually he would get caught in the bathroom trying to smoke it, and she would tell him to throw it out. He cried and told her that he wanted to stop, and the two of them went to go throw it out in the outside garbage. But later that night he would go back out, pick the stuff out from the garbage, and start smoking it again, and eventually he would get caught a second time, and this time his mother told him he needed to go to a doctor and get put on Suboxone. Now Suboxone is a drug that's meant to get you off of heroin, and the way that it basically works is once you start taking this stuff, you don't get sick from the heroin withdrawals anymore, so you don't need to take heroin every single day just to feel normal, but at the same time you also can get high off Suboxone, so doctors only usually give you about 1 pill a day, and then you have to come back every day and get another one, but apparently this doctor decided to just give him 40 at once, and because of that he would start abusing that substance as well to get high, and even worse, he started selling the stuff on the street so he could get more money to buy different types of drugs for himself. Now during the time that all this addiction was going on, he was still in school, but of course there was no way he was going to be able to keep up with his studies. He would try to do tests and then fail them, getting very upset and coming to his mother for help. And because she was actually an educator herself, her solution was to take him out of school and put him in homeschooling, which of course was super easy for him and only led him to more drug use as well as isolation, because he basically had no friends at the time. All those older friends who had got him hooked on the stuff in the first place just weren't around anymore. They either OD'd, were living on the street, or just weren't able to see him anymore because his mother was keeping a close eye on him. Eventually though, she would start to feel bad for her son, again and his isolation, so she would put him back in school for his grade 12 year in hopes of re-socializing him with his graduating class, but unfortunately he was caught with a crack pipe and then he was expelled from school once and for all. After this happened, it was decided that he should go to rehab, and he ended up going in for about 4 or 5 months and actually got sober. He was able to finish his grade 12 while he was in the rehab center and actually got his diploma, and was also able to find a sponsor just down the street from him who was able to watch over him for the next couple years. And if you don't know what a sponsor is, it's basically an older addict who's been out of addiction for a long time, and they help out the younger addicts who are just starting to be sober by, basically talking to them, guiding them through it, stuff like that. And because of that, Drip was actually able to stay sober for 2 entire whole years, and during that time he even started to record his own music with a friend in a car. Yeah, it turns out he had a friend named Burger on the Beat that was making EDM music at the time, but eventually the two of them would start making rap music together. He would freestyle, he would record it all in his car, and eventually they would start to put it on beats and release it, but most of the early stuff is now lost. The only stuff we really know about it is it was recorded on Chief Keef style beats, and because of that it was more hype rap. It wasn't really the sad stuff that we would later become accustomed to. At this point in his career, he was saying he was more inspired by Lil B than anybody else, so it probably sounded pretty close to that. He was recording all his early music around 2012, but it wasn't until 2014 that we can really check to see what his music sounded like. We got this song called Lotus Blossom, which a lot of people say is his first real song. I don't think it is. I think there was actually a couple songs before that, but they got deleted. And there's a music video and everything. You can check it out, and you can tell that he's going a lot more for that hype style of rap that he really ran with for the next couple years. Unfortunately though, it wasn't long before he found that he couldn't be creative with his music anymore, so he started smoking a little bit of weed to try to get ideas for lyrics, but that eventually led back to pain pills, and then he was full on back into his addiction only a couple weeks later. Drip is that type of guy that really can't have anything. If he relapses on any type of drug, he'll eventually get back to the harder stuff within no time at all. This would lead him to eventually get arrested, kicked out of his house, and with nowhere left to turn, he looked to his girlfriend, who really was ready to leave him at the time, but she still felt bad for him because she knew that even though she was sick of all his constant relapses, if she didn't do anything, he'd probably pass away from an OD, so her and her mother made out a plan to move him to LA, and that's where he would live for the rest of his time. Once he got there, he started making connections with different rappers. One of them was known as Gigi Nex, who he did a bunch of collaboration songs with, and he even dropped his first project called Soaking Mac. He was able to connect to Charlie Shuffler through him, and then eventually he would meet Cold Heart over Instagram, with the two of them bonding over their love for skateboarding. Those two would eventually meet in real life and start playing shows together, and it was at one of those shows that Drip would finally meet Lil Tracy, and I'm assuming Lil Peep. You can see the two of them performing together at this show here, so they definitely knew each other, but he never talks too much about Peep, so I'm not sure how close they really were. And he would also meet Brendan Savage and Lil Lotus at these shows, who he became really close friends with. Brendan Savage in particular, he actually already knew back from San Diego, but he didn't recognize him at the time. He was able to get some production credits from Ned Arb on this project. I'm not even going to try to say the name of it, and then after that he'd get a Lil Peep feature on his next project known as Blinged Out. And the two also released a song together called Another Cup, which is actually his biggest song on SoundCloud, and it was on Spotify as well, but unfortunately it was taken down because of the sample issues on it. And this is unfortunately a pretty common issue for a lot of people in this scene. They were the first ones to start using samples in this way, but they never cleared them, and they don't want to go through the headache to try to get them cleared, so they don't get to put them on streaming services, and because of that, a lot of fans never get to listen to them and can't find them. As the year 2016 went on, it got worse and worse for Drip. He'd get sober for a while, and then he would find some Xanax and relapse. Eventually he ended up on Skid Row, and then he overdosed a couple times, but even that didn't stop him from doing drugs. He was so hooked that he just couldn't stop. Because after all, LA is probably the worst place in the world to be a drug addict, because you can get anything you want whenever you want it, especially if you don't have to work or go to a job. And it was this cycle of addiction that would eventually lead him to write his most meaningful song, and probably his most popular and well-known song to date, called One Shot. This song is all about his struggles with addiction, and it's not just one of those songs that's like, I'm sad, I'm flexing, I got a girl who don't love me. It really talked about what was actually going on in his life. It was so real, so raw, and got so close to what it was like to be an addict that a lot of people attached onto it, and it became a very popular song because of that. If the name of the game is flexing emotionally when it comes to emo rap, he was flexing realistically, because a lot of people had never heard somebody actually talk about that type of hard drug. Everybody was like, I'm popping a Xan, they're flexing about their drug use, but this was like, yeah, this is what can really happen when the rockstar lifestyle really comes to an end. And the song even got a pretty gnarly music video that was posted on his story, and after that he was basically blown up within the underground. He still never really went mainstream, but this was definitely his biggest moment. And after this, he finally decided it was time to get sober for real, so he checked himself into rehab, and by 2017 he came out fully sober. And yes, he did slip up a couple times here and there. One time he started smoking weed, and then he started doing a little bit of ketamine, but he was able to catch himself and stop it before it really got too bad. And he really managed to stick to it, because he stayed sober throughout the rest of the year, and he actually still sober to this day as far as I know. In my last video I said somebody was sober and they weren't, and a lot of people were mad about that, so I'm not going to say for sure, but I think he's still sober even to this day. Once he got out of rehab and sobered up, he completely changed his style of music, going for a more melodic singing type of style as opposed to the old stuff that he used to do that was more akin to Lil B. And usually this would be a death sentence for most artists' career because their fans would completely leave after they changed styles, but it seems like people actually preferred the melodic stuff to the old stuff, so his career got even bigger and better and his fans stuck around. He dropped 2 projects in 2017 called Anita Coupe Part 1 and 2, and then in 2018 he dropped Drag You Through My Hell and Worthless. It seems like by 2019 he was able to get himself a distribution deal because he would release his first official studio album known as True Love, True Pain, and you can tell that he was really going through a rough time in his life when this project dropped because apparently 2 of his friends actually overdosed during the recording process, so he really delved into that, the pain, despair, and the loss of friends and love. Once again, that's really the appeal to Drippin So Pretty. He's more realistic with his lyrics. He really talks about stuff that's actually going on in his life. He's not just like, I'm popping his Xan, ooh, I'm sad. I'm sorry for making you go through that, but that's not much better than a lot of these emo rappers nowadays, so it is what it is. Soon after this, he ended up going on tour with Brendan Savage across Europe, doing his first real live shows where he wasn't drunk or on drugs. He said it was actually pretty nerve-wracking because he wasn't used to it, but he ended up doing a really good job and a lot of his fans really appreciated his turnout. After this, in 2021, he dropped Rest in Peace, which was another really meaningful album to him because it was actually dedicated to his father who had just passed away. Now, Drip never really talks about his father, so I'm not sure what the relationship was like there, but it seems like it might have been a little bit strained. He talks about his father passing away in a hotel room and he was there by himself at the very end. I'm not sure why that is. I could kind of speculate, but I feel like it's a little rude to try to think why his father passed away, so we'll just say that it was a dark day for him and he ended up putting that all into his music, and because of that, this project is considered a fan favorite and still probably one of his most popular to date. He also recorded another track around this time known as Fingers, which was supposed to represent his father's final moments, but for some reason he didn't end up dropping it right in 2021. He sat on it for quite a while, only previewing it here and there and actually performing it once or twice live, but it seems like he was waiting to film a music video that would be really special for the track and then release it off his next project, his 2022 album known as Betrayed, and no, not that Betrayed. The music video for this track was actually filmed in the very same hotel his father passed away in, so that must have been a really emotional moment for him, but despite that, the track came out sounding pretty great and he was able to really make a meaningful moment for all of his fans. And that pretty much brings us up to modern day where he's still performing shows, still making music. He actually dropped another album pretty recently and it seems like his fans still really appreciate him despite the fact that his fan base is pretty small overall. Last year there was a couple videos made about his life that might have slightly boosted him, but unfortunately it seems like he still remains a pretty underrated artist, and I think he really stands out among the crowd of other emo rappers because I never really heard a whole lot of his music before I started making this video, but after I started listening to it I was like, whoa, he really sounds pretty close to Peep. He sounds like he really has some emotion in his voice and he actually sounds pretty good when he sings. Now this is usually the part of the video where I talk about how cool somebody is and how I really think they're a genuine guy, but honestly a lot of these emo rappers just put on a persona of being cool. I'm not saying Drippin isn't cool, but a lot of the other guys I have spoken to, they act like they're so humble and genuine and nice, but then when you speak to them it's the exact opposite thing. They have a huge ego, they don't want to speak to you, they're overall the weirdo, and there's just too many weirdos in this scene for me to be giving out free endorsements anymore. But his music's still really good no matter what. His story is definitely inspiring. I'm glad he got sober. Besides that, shout out Drippin So Pretty, I guess. And yeah, sorry for coming off as so negative. I'm just starting to learn more and more about this scene and I'm getting more jaded to it, I guess, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video despite that. Big shout out to Knife Gang. If you're part of Knife Gang, leave a knife emoji in the comments below. You know what it is. I got a Patreon if you want to throw me a doubloon over there. It really helps the channel out. Subscribe because we're moving our way up to 14K. That's the next goal. And I got a second channel called Twisted Society where I'm trying to put people on, put their music, interview people. So if you're interested in that, go over there and subscribe as well. And with all that said, thank you guys for watching. See you in the next one.